Welcome to this week's non-league football debate. I'm delighted to say that Frank Wilson, Jody Brown, Anthony Gayle and Peter Augustine join us on the back of the net sofa, and there's plenty to talk about this evening. We're going to talk all about referees in non-league football, and does everybody aspire to play like Manchester City and Barcelona? You can get involved in the debate tonight. Just search official BOTN across social media. Let's start with the referees debate this evening. It's one of those ones that goes on every season. I don't think it'll ever end. We've seen a couple of incidents this weekend that we'll have a look at shortly. But referees, Anthony, I'm going to start with you. Is enough done to make sure that standards are consistent throughout the non-league game?
I think, like ourselves, coaches, managers, I think officials need that help as well. I think it's very important. I think when we get our coach education, we go for our UEFA B licences, A licences. The education's exactly the same for referees. And we had a situation ourselves last weekend against Paul where dissent is such a big thing now in the game. When a player says something wrongly to a referee, they're very quick to jump on it. But the question I fired back, and I'll open this to you guys as well, is is an official allowed to swear at a player? Have you ever experienced anything like that in your time, gentlemen?
Frank, Jody?
I've been disrespected a lot of times by officials, and I've often said similar as what you've just said then. I've said, what makes you think you can speak to me like that when we can't speak to you in that way? I think the respect campaign's gone too far now, to be honest. I think we've lost sight of protecting players, protecting managers, coaches, and the referees have become like a protected species. And I think that there's an imbalance, and we need to regain the balance where everyone's treated equally, not just the referees.
So you had a particular incident where an official swore at a player. Was there anything that happened from that?
So last weekend, Paul Town, 19 minutes on the clock, 1-0 down, another penalty decision given, of which the young man dived, and you could see he dived. And sometimes a 3G does interesting things, as I'm sure you've all had your different experiences, but he's got his foot caught in the turf and he's gone over. Again, maybe you can see from the angle, or the referee's angle might not have got the correct one, but obviously you're going to need help from the linesman if he's got a better position, which the linesman was staring directly in front of the incident. The referee's flagged for a penalty. The young man's down on the floor laughing. Penalty was given. No conversation at all between linesman and referee. And me, obviously, from the side, straight away, I said, is a conversation not in order here, linesman, because you were in a better position? No bad language, just a conversation of which he completely ignored me. My goalkeeper and players ran towards him. The linesman used not a very nice word to usher my goalkeeper back into his goal, which obviously I can't say on a radio show now. When they're so back in the net rather, but I can't stress strongly enough, when one of my players swears, I jump on that straight away, because I'm all about respect and respecting people, making sure they're respectful players, respectful in the environment. And when they swear, we even fine them ourselves as a football club, because I think that's the lightest booking you can give. But when an official swears at a player, not just once but twice, and then my goalkeeper reacts and he gets a straight red card, I don't see the fairness in that, and of which we then have to put a centre half in goal for the remaining 70 minutes of a fixture, which is hard enough in the Southern League.
We could talk, I'm sure we could talk about incidences that you've all seen that are similar to this, or have been similar with officials, maybe not talking, and inconsistencies. I think the question we've got to ask is, how does it get better?
I said something in social media this week, Ben, and I sort of posed the question, or posed the idea of having a fourth official at non-league level, because I think that there's times when games just become uncontrollable, or they lose control, and I've always, I'm sure some of these gents might verify this, I've always admired other sports, rugby and some of the other sort of higher discipline sports, where you don't see as much of the things that we're talking about in those sorts of environments. And more often than not, I'm picking up on something that Anthony just said there. I think that communication and decision making needs to improve, because I don't think that referees engage enough with managers or players or their own officials. And I think there needs to be a lot more dialogue. So my personal opinion might be that maybe adding another official to the environment, someone that could potentially, like a fourth official, that could manage the dugout situation as well as oversee the game, might be an idea that might improve environments.
Is that realistic in non-league football to think that at these levels we can just add another official?
I think that when you spoke about the communication, I think it's extremely important, but I think everyone's experienced at this level. When a decision is given, it's made quickly. Straight away, the whistle is blown. There's no... it's a quick thought, it's a quick decision. I think sometimes if you've blown the whistle and you take a step back and there's a little bit of communication, a decision can be overturned. It can be overturned. I haven't seen that in my 3.5 years in management. I haven't seen it when there's decisions where I'll speak to referees and linesmen after and they'll actually apologise. And they'll apologise now thinking about it, which they should have time to do on a football pitch, where players crowd them, where players get around them. Sometimes decisions are made for them, where I think the rule come in the Premier League where they couldn't, referees can't be smothered by players to affect a decision.
Is that clubs then controlling their players? Is that we have to look at it from both sides and look at it from the side of the referee? If players are getting sent off because they're being surrounded by a whole team, is that then, we mentioned the respect campaign, we mentioned that it had gone too far, but is that then down to the managers and the clubs to stop that happening?
I had an incident when I was Haybridge manager, played against Witham Town, centre forward went up quite late, elbowed our centre back in the windpipe, knocked him out to the floor. Linesman saw it, he was standing right in front of my technical area, had the same view as me. I said, linesman, have you seen that elbow? He said, yeah, I saw that elbow. I said, well, you've got to put your flag up. He said, no, it's not my jurisdiction. I said, so you've just seen violent conduct, but you're not going to put your flag up? He said, it's not my jurisdiction. I said, well, if it's not your jurisdiction and you've seen an incident, then you're cheating. You need to put your flag up. I got sent off for saying that he was cheating. About 3 days later, the official, the referee, contacted the club secretary, asked for my phone number, called me, said he'd seen the footage, apologised for his mistake. And I said, what should we do in that situation? And he said, if your players had crowded me as soon as the elbow happened, I would have reacted to the player's reaction and sent the player off. He said, but your players didn't crowd me. And I said, well, that's because we're told not to crowd you. So I discourage my players from crowding you. So we didn't crowd you. And I got sent off, and I've got a 3-game stadium ban for calling your linesman a cheat, who said he saw the elbow but wasn't going to put his flag up. You know, I'll sit here on the radio show and say that is cheating. If you see something and you don't inform the official, you are cheating. You're there to uphold the laws. And for the referee to call me, credit to him to call me and admit his mistake. I said, could you put that in a letter? Because I've obviously admitted the offence to the FA, but I'm going to put a mitigating letter because we've got the video footage of the elbow. And he said, no, sorry, I can't do that because it would affect my progress as a referee.
Pete, I was going to ask you whether it sounded like technology perhaps is letting non-league down and we're not getting the support. Frank mentioned the fourth official, looking back at the video evidence. I think one of the things we've got to ask is that consistency then the biggest problem in non-league football? Is it really that different from the Football League?
I don't really think it is. I think you've got 3 people who are having to control 22 players and a myriad of incidents. And I think it's very easy to criticise referees, which we all do. I've done in the past, to my shame. But what I do think is a bigger thing, and Frank's alluded to this, is about the cooperation between managers, coaches and referees. What we tend to find is that referees are on their own, they do their own thing, coaches are on their own and managers are on their own, but never the twain shall meet. And what we need is some cooperation where referees, managers and coaches get together. So when we talk about education, we'll talk about education, we'll talk about coaching, and we'll talk about goalkeeping and all those other parts. But the referee's a big part of that, and we need to merge that together so it's all part of the game. And I think that would be a big help.
Is Pete right? Is it, dare we say, is it about education?
I think he's spot on. I remember at Millwall when we went through the EPPP process and educating the players, educating the staff. It was one of the best processes, I think, in my coaching career, how much I learned. And one of those processes was the parents on the outside of a football pitch and how we can educate parents to be better parents and let the players play. And if you actually got everyone in a room and sat down and discussed it, your differences, and discuss your different thoughts and different situations, people can become better from that. People can become better people, better at what they do. And if these things are put on, I'd go. And I'm sure a lot of managers and referees, especially if they're open to development and improving themselves, they will go.
We are hoping that we will get a referee or two onto the show in the next few weeks, and we can revisit this topic. For now, we're just going to show you some footage. Our cameras were at Great Wakering Rovers against Heybridge Swifts on Saturday, and it was a game that was marred with controversy, and there were a couple of particular incidents in that game that actually made both sets of players and managers lose control, and the game seemed to spiral to a certain way. The first incident we'll show you now, and that is of a coming together of two players. There was, you'll see here, a nick on the ball from the Heybridge Swifts player in red. Great Wakering Rovers are in the green and white, and we can clearly see from the replays here that the ball was nicked away. The first thing that you said when you saw this, Pete, was the referee's position. You had a couple of questions on.
Well, yeah, first of all, if you look at where the referee is positioned in the clip, you'll see that his players in front of him. So what he sees, quite possibly, is that the player's gone over and the direction of the ball. So he's seen that and he's thinking, oh, actually, that's a free kick. Because he can't actually see the tackle go in. So he's got a problem there straight away. Now, is that because he's not with play? Is he not in the right position or whatever it is? So, but to him, it looks like a clear foul. And also look at the way that the player falls over, because it's a little bit. It's almost like a jackknife, isn't it? So the referee's thinking, oh, that's definitely a free kick. So, and then, could the assistant have helped him in that situation? Quite possibly, but we don't know the conversation that's been had between the referee and his assistant. Has the referee said, "I will take care of all decisions. You just do throw-ons and offsides, maybe"? And
is that something that perhaps we talked about this? Should it be made clearer to managers and players before the game that the referee says, "Look, I've said to the linesman, don't get involved in any decisions. It's purely me that's going to make them."
100%. I would like to see officials meet, and all officials, referees and linesmen. I'd like to see every game have a situation where the officials met with the management staff for 2 or 3 minutes before a game and just outlined how the game was going to run. It doesn't take too long. Referees could clearly identify with management and just say, today our responsibilities lie here. If you've got a question, direct it to here. So that then when we're in the dugout and it's Jody's team versus my team and something happens in that particular incident, Jody and I have been debriefed as management before the game, and we know that the referee will have some autonomy in that decision-making process. But I think that the communication is flawed. So we go into games guessing or wondering who to ask or where to put our questions.
But I see it as common sense that if you've got 3 officials, you use 3 officials. I've had this dispute with officials many times. Why if your linesman sees something, is he not allowed to give it? It just seems to me ludicrous that something can happen in front of your eyes, but the match referee has told you not to flag for that, only to flag for offsides and throw-ins. It just seems a waste of resources to me.
And we saw in that clip that after the incident had taken place, that there was an exchange of words, shall we say, between the management teams of both sides. In fact, that's what you were talking about. Is perhaps if they had been told, and the conversation there, we didn't play it on the clip, was actually that ask your linesman, go speak to your linesman. If you'd have been told as a manager that I'm not going to use my linesman as a referee, then perhaps that would have meant that you wouldn't have been asking that question.
Exactly. And I think that conventionally what we see every single time something like this happens, and we've all been involved in it, the referee gives a decision that you as a manager you don't agree with. That normally the first person that you look to is the linesman. It's like the go-to move, isn't it? You question the linesman on something. You are, liner, did you see that? And you've seen it in that example as well. And that's just because we're misdirected. We don't know as managers or coaches where to direct our questions or express our opinions, angers, whatever it might be, frustrations. There needs to be more clarity in terms of when you can challenge, how you can challenge, if you can challenge.
It's quite interesting. Me and Pete were having the conversation this week as well about officials and pros and cons, there were positives, wasn't there, at the same time, areas of development. And the big thing for me when a decision is given or a tackle is made, not just the communication, but actually the ability to communicate, because normally the opposition's bench is so loud and they're jumping on the pitch with every single decision, not just players, but I mean, one thing I've witnessed this year just in general is not just a manager jumping up, but you've got 10 people jumping up on a sideline making more noise than probably the 200 fans in the whole stadium, where, I mean, if that's happening on the side, then obviously the players are going to be reactive to that, and that's the type of group that you're creating. And then the communication then, and this is in their favour now, becomes even harder because you're trying to break through the noise of the opposing bench, and that's another discussion altogether as well.
Yeah, but here's the thing I do think, and I think, again, to add balance to this, because, again, you know, there are no referees here to defend themselves. So imagine this situation. You walk into any place, where it doesn't matter where it is, and you walk in, and already as soon as you walk in, there's hostility towards you. Whilst you're there, and it might be at your place of work.
Waitrose.
Yeah. You've got into Waitrose, and all the cashiers and checkout people say to you, "What are you doing here? Get out." Every time you pick up your broccoli, they go, "We're picking up that broccoli for," or whatever it is. Yeah, you're gonna go on the defensive. Now, the way I see it is for referees, and it goes back again to Frank's point about education and that communication side. If we, as I would say, educated coaches, we try to, as best we can, to make sure that we don't have a go at referees. But the point is, if the conversation happens between you and the referee, then it's much harder for you to have a go at that referee. So if you've got a relationship with the referee, it's much harder for you to have a go at the referee. And the referee is much more likely to come and talk to you. And I speak to a referee quite often. And I'll speak to him about an incident, and he'll say, the reason that happened is because of this. Did you do this, and did you say this to the referee? I said, well, actually, yeah, I did. So, well, how do you think that referee will feel because you've said that?
Is that not part of the job? We could look at high-pressure jobs across the world, and people talk about managers that are under pressure in the Premier League. The likes of Jose Mourinho gets a lot of stick for Manchester United, and people say that's because Manchester United is the biggest club football job in the world. The same with the England manager at the moment. Obviously, Gareth Southgate is getting nothing but praise, but before him, that job was, renowned to be heavily critical. As a referee, when you go into it, that's part of the job. That pressure and perhaps that criticism is part of the job.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think it should be. I think if we make a mistake as a coach, nobody comes up to us immediately and says, why did you play that player? You might get it afterwards because your chairman comes in and speaks to you about the fact that you've lost 6 on the bounce, right? But you've lost 6 on the bounce. You know it's a performance industry. But we don't get the type of abuse that referees get. And I think, we get it from fans, obviously, at at those levels. But we've got to be very, very careful. We have to have referees to referee the game. And if referees are getting abused, and that's happening at a very, very low level, so in park football and all that sort of stuff, we're not going to. The good referees who are starting out, if they're getting abused in games at under 10s, they're not going to make it up to the non-league, because they're going to say, I ain't doing this, because they've got other things that they can do. And what we'll end up with, we won't end up with the best referees, because we don't know who the best referees are, because we've never seen them, because they might not make it through.
Yeah, but at the same time, they're paid to make decisions. And it's like players. Players lower down make bad decisions. Players in the Premier League make better decisions. And it's the same with referees. So when you're down in step 5, step 4, step 3, some of the referees do make some pretty poor decisions. And what I would like to see is a degree of humility. And I don't very often see it. I'm not a shouter and a screamer from the sideline, but I will ask a question. And if you ask a question and you get dismissed in a rude, abrupt way, then you're a product of your environment. That happens 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. Go away, Jody. Shut up, Jody. In the end, I'm going to go, well, why don't you shut up?
But it's cultural then, isn't it? it's a culture that we have created, and I think that we've got an opportunity in non-league football where there are less supporters, less impact from the crowd. You've got more of an opportunity to control your culture, control your environment. Let it be known when they come through the door on a Tuesday night, managers, staff, players, referees. Make it known that there is a culture at this football club and in this division where respect is a priority, and then you'll start to see things improve.
Respect can only be a priority when it's mutual. I don't think respect... I've found that the respect campaign is so imbalanced that it doesn't work. Because the respect is only towards the referee. You're only punished for poor respect towards the referee. You see some violent conduct, you see dissent between players, you see poor sportsmanship, you see blatant infringement of the laws, and it's not punished the same as dissent is. If you show dissent to a referee, you get a 3-game stadium ban. If you 2-foot someone knee high and snap their cruciate, you get a 1-game ban for a straight red card. Well, the two offences are not comparable, but you get heavily punished for speaking to a referee. You can punch someone and get a lower punishment than you get for speaking to a referee.
But we talked about, I made a comment earlier about rugby just as an example of a sport where you see a culture of discipline. What you've just said there is absolutely correct. Referees now feel like, or we feel like as coaches and managers, that we can't question a referee. You're not allowed to talk to the referee. They tell you, their body language tells you that they don't want to receive that information. So if we can change the culture and change the communication process and say, right, as managers and coaches, we're allowed to have conversations. If we start to have sensible conversations, we'll hopefully see better results.
And also, Pete was talking about going to Waitrose. I mean, I haven't made many mistakes when I go to Waitrose because when I look at the aisles, it says cereals, bread, pastas. You get your communication. So when we talk about Waitrose, mistakes can't be made. So why can't we get that form of communication as well?
And I do think, what managers don't go up to the ref when he arrives at the ground and say, hi mate, how are you? Can I get you anything? Can I get you a drink? Nice weather. And the ref goes, oh, your pitch is looking good, mate. And you go, yeah, they work really hard on the pitch. You have all this small talk, the whistle goes and they just change. They do change. So, and I know I don't change. I'm the same on this show, I'm the same in the dugout, I'm the same on the training ground. I don't change. It's them that change.
So finally with this, I was going to ask how it gets better, but I think we'll come back to this debate in future weeks and we will try and get a couple of referees onto the back of the net sofa to answer questions. But is it down to, Pete, I'm going to let you have the last word on this. Is it a culture thing? Does it need work? There needs to be more work done at the communication side of this.
It does need work, and I think a lot of the work is around education. And I come on here because I am a coach educator, but everything I see points to that idea of education. I look at coach education in this country, how much that's improved, the work that the FA has done in coach education. It's vastly changed. Now, I don't know what happens in referee education, but what I do know, and having gone back into coaching myself and seen some referees, and not all, some referees, and I think you need better education. And I see some referees who are very, very good. And I think you've taken your education seriously. And I think that's what it's down to. And it's like coaching. I see. I was at a game the other week that I was, and I looked at the other dugout, and it was like screaming banshees for 90 minutes. I thought, you got problems. You lot got problems, you know, and that's again about education.
We'll put that to, if we get a couple of referees on, we'll put that to them about the education. We're going to move on now. We're going to look at an incident that happened this week involving a referee. It's also good to know, by the way, that a couple of the members of the team on the back of the net sofa are doing all right, shopping at Waitrose. We're going to take a look at an incident that also happened on Saturday at the Haybridge Swifts against Great Wakering Rovers game, and it was a sending off for Matthew Price. We're going to look at this incident now, and this is a debate for the week. Should this have been a sending off? We've slowed the clip down for you and given you a couple of replays. There seemed to be no contact in the challenge. It caused a lot of chaos on the pitch amongst the Haybridge players, and I'm sure there will be an appeal on this. What's your take on it? Was it a sending off?
It does look to me as though he's had a little flick out at the Great Wakering player. So there is intent. No, there isn't any contact. And again, I just think the argument arises from the lack of consistency, because I think 99 times out of 100 at that particular level of football, the referees don't react to that. On that day, for whatever reason, the referee looked for it, found it, saw it, and sent him off. He definitely kicked out at him, but he missed him. So I just think it's the consistency that's the issue.
Would that have been perhaps a culmination of things in the game if the player had been in the referee's ear during the 90 minutes?
Yes, definitely. And I think that when you watch that as a neutral, you're left wondering and thinking, what could that have been about? Because the incident itself doesn't highlight enough. Now, I've managed that particular player, so I know what his temperament's like. So, again, it's a question of referees and their decision-making process, and does the human side of them build up a opinion or an approach to players? Are they stereotyping certain players based on previous performances, previous occasions where they might have refereed that team or that player? And again, does that come under the banner of the pressure that they might feel in games? Because as an incident isolated, it doesn't look like much, but it leads me to believe that there's something more to that.
I see 3 of them on average per game.
And not red cards.
And not even a yellow.
Agreed.
And when we speak about consistency, consistent messages, education, there we go again. Because if we know as management and players what you can get punished for and what specific decisions, because I had a player last year, I had Daryl Coleman, fantastic season for me, unfortunately not with me this year, but great season. But the amount of times players would do that off the ball to try and get a reaction out of Daryl, and it happened at South Park and he ended up seeing red. But they're the things they miss. And then I see, for instance, we had it last night, Taureen Roberts, tricky wide player. Yusuf Bamba last year, tricky wide player. Happens consistently, and people then hide behind the fact that he's more dynamic than the defender. Okay, well, he's more dynamic. The defender has to be a little bit more intelligent then and stand off and get his body shape right then. And he shouldn't be punished for a bit of class. And I think that there's not enough consistent messages going on in the game in general.
Don't you think you just compare it to the highest level? So if I take a training session, if I do a team talk, if I do a debrief, I'm always trying to be as professional as I can. So a referee, what is the best example he's got of refereeing? The Premier League. Would that incident in the Premier League, if seen by the referee, would that referee have taken action against that? I think he would have done. David Beckham in the World Cup, flicked out, hardly touched the guy, got sent off and become the pantomime villain for the nation. As he says, every week you see it happen 2, 3, 4 times. And I used to find myself saying to referees, when I get home tonight and watch Match of the Day, if there's anything like that happens, there's going to be straight reds. And they go, oh, Jody, it's not the Premier League. Well, I've said this on the show before. Are we playing the same rules, or are there non-league rules and professional rules?
So in the interests of a debate, was it a sending off for you, Frank?
No, I'm going to be honest, no.
Jody?
It's a very hard one for me because I can see, and I know Matt Price. I like him, I coached him, I signed him. But I did see him kick out at him.
So we'll take that as a yes, Anthony?
Because I'm frustrated with the amount of times my players get kicked out at the weekend, I'm going to say yes.
And Pete, what's your view on that? Was it sending off? One way to answer.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. He's kicked out the player, and it's a silly sending off, and he knows what he's doing.
Was it a straight red? Sorry, Pete. Or yellow?
Straight red.
Yeah, so if you're going to kick out somebody, it doesn't matter whether you miss them or not. The fact is you've kicked out.
We'll take that as your yes answer. We'd love to get your views and your thoughts onto the show. Official BOTN on social media. We'll put that clip out as well, and we can have a vote. Was it a sending off or not? Straight red card. The second half of the show tonight, we're going to be talking about styles of play in non-league football. I know the guys can't wait to get into this one. Does every team in non-league football now aspire to play like Manchester City or Barcelona? Anthony, I know that you like to play attractive football, and you did last season, and I'm sure continue it into this season as well. Is it now become essential that anyone that coaches in the game, that plays in the game, looks up to the likes of Manchester City and Barcelona and says that's the way we've got to play?
I think a lot of people want to play like it and would like to play like it. I hear a lot of debates, a lot of people talking about it, and I don't mind saying it, but people questioned us last season. People said, have they only got a plan A? Is that the only way they can play? And And I chucked the question back and said, can you not coach your team to play like Plan A? Can you not develop them? Can you not work with them to try and play like that? I mean, we play on a 3G surface, so therefore we need to try and utilise that 3G surface as best as possible. I like technical football players, so we don't want to make the game a battle in that respect, where we're hanging balls up and putting them in channels and fight balls from our centre forwards. We want to be intelligent and try and use the ball wisely, use it through the thirds, and we find by doing that, especially the last 25, 30 minutes in games, they very much go our way. And you can see that statistically last season, you can see that this year with the way we play football. I mean, the style I've picked up on, I'm not saying it's the right way, but I'm saying that people have their education growing up, they're around different environments, and you're on these coaching courses, you're around these educated people your entire life. I mean, I've been very fortunate with the people I've been around and where I've worked, and you lead your own, you find your own pathway, you find your own way of playing, the way you believe, and if you believe that's the way to play, you stick by it and you make sure it works, and I'll continually do it. I mean, it's been questioned again this year, and we've conceded goals. We've conceded goals by doing it, but I'm a big believer with the young group that we've got. I think the more mistakes, and we have made mistakes, but the mistakes we're making, we're not making again. They're an intelligent group, and by learning that way, I genuinely feel they're going to progress further in the game.
Pete, when you look at it now, you look at football from the highest level down. We're even seeing it with the national team now with England and the way they played against Croatia at the weekend. Is it simply wrong to not play the game that way? If we look back into the perhaps the late 80s and the 90s, we saw certain teams. Liverpool was synonymous with playing attractive passing football. There were other teams like Wimbledon who played a different way, and there perhaps wasn't the same criticism that there is now if you don't play that attractive passing style. I know Wimbledon did get a criticism for their particular style of play, but there were certainly plenty of different ways of playing the game. It now seems like there is only one way to play.
Well, I think when we talk about Manchester City and Barcelona, and we talk about the Spanish way and the tiki-taka and all that sort of stuff, you've got to remember this, is that these teams play and keep the ball in certain areas. Once they've drawn you in, they will play that longer ball. So it's the idea of that, you know, I think it's a falseness to say that Manchester City just play through you. They don't. Sometimes if it's on, they'll play over you. Look at the goal they scored in the Carabao Cup final against Arsenal. It was goalkeeper, Aguero, goal. That was it. You know, so the assist went to the goalkeeper, Alisson. So, you know, it's knowing where and when to play in that style. Sometimes you'll keep it because you want to keep it. You want to suck the other team in and draw them into areas that they don't want to go into. You might make them want to press you, and then you go in behind them.
Let's look at it from a non-league football point of view. When we see many non-league games every week, there's certain games that you go and watch, and as a supporter or as perhaps a manager going to watch another game, you can see teams that we're not talking about perhaps the precise control that Manchester City and Barcelona have, even when they go direct. But there's really a sort of way of playing that is perhaps not attractive on the eye. It's not a patient passing game. It's not attacking with precision. It is just getting the ball up the pitch and winning second balls. Has that become more unacceptable?
I mean, it's different opinions, isn't it? But I think a lot of people want identity with their play, your teams. I know we played you pre-season, Jody, and I just said to you how impressed I was. I mean, you're the best side still to this point, and I'll happily say it as well on here, that we played. You had identity, you moved the ball. I'm not just saying it, they moved the ball. We played a back three that day. We tried to play a back three, but you knew how to play against us, and when you did have the ball, you used it wisely, you used it correctly on the 3G, but always with the intention, and it's quite interesting what you said, your first intention must be to play forward. Your first intention must be to play forward because that's where the goal is. But if not, and this is what I say to the boys, create another angle, move the ball off the spot to create a pathway to play in that direction. And end product is key. And it's having that identity about your play and knowing what you want to do. Not, okay, well, we're going to play this week, boys, but do you know what? We lost 3 on the bounce now. So what we're going to do, fullback's going to get it, and I just want you now 50 times just to clip the ball over the opposite fullback's head. But then that don't work for 3 games, so no, we're going to pass the ball now. It's just finding that identity. When you get that identity, getting players that fit that framework, because you might not have those players at the same time, but as a manager, that's where the recruitment becomes important. If you want to play that way, I mean, it took me 2.5 years to find the team I needed to play that correct style of football. 2.5 years it took me.
It's an interesting point that Anthony makes. When we look at non-league football, and perhaps 10 years ago, it was the poor relation. He said the football would be played in the Football League and in the Premier League. And when you get down to non-league football, there was a sort of an image, an expectation that in non-league teams would lump the ball. Interesting you mentioned about having the right players. Have we reached a stage now with the money and perhaps the attention put into education and educating coaches that it really is, even if you haven't got the right group of players, unacceptable to not try and play the right way in non-league football?
I don't think you can say it's unacceptable. I think every coach has the right to coach how he wants. And I think what it is finding something that works for you and that works for your players. It's well documented that I'm similar to these guys. So I like a possession brand of football, control the tempo of the game with possession, find weaknesses in the team, overload teams in certain areas, and that's how I would play. But then there's other managers who do play very, very low risk football. They don't trust their players to retain the ball in areas of the field where they could get countered against. So they play low risk football, they play percentages, they sign good players who will make things happen in both boxes, and they win games and they win leagues. So I don't think you can be critical of it. I think they develop less players, those teams, because they don't allow players to express themselves. And I think what Anthony says about an identity, I think you'd be naive to think that all non-league managers are as intelligent as that or as him. I've probably done another one of those classic quotes for you to retweet there. I'm not saying they're not intelligent. What I'm saying is I don't think all managers have a playing philosophy. I think a lot of people pick the team and go, work hard, run hard, win your headers, win your tackles, go out and win the game. I don't think all managers work on Tuesday and Thursday on a style of play. I don't think they adapt to certain oppositions. I think they just send good players out on the field to go and win the game.
Frank, on the back of that, is a win in non-league football, is a win still a win? Or is it? Or we are now in the stage where we're judging not just on results, but on what a manager can bring as far as a style of play?
I don't quite think that we've got to the stage now where supporters, for example, are satisfied with the style of football over the result. Because at the end of the day, I still think that winning football matches at non-league level specifically is probably what is deemed most important. I definitely think that we are going into an era where styles of players we've been discussing tonight and almost a rebranding of non-league football is more existent, more prevalent now, because I think that sort of stereotypically non-league football has always been seen to be quite direct, and that's been the history of that, and there's been a stigma attached to it for that. But now with coach education and the way that football is being played from the top level down, we are starting to see that bleed into non-league football, and rightly so, because that's, lots of young coaches aspire to sort of see those traits and trends. I still, as a manager, when I was managing, thought that winning was important. But then the reasons for winning, how we went about that, were specific to me and my philosophy and how I wanted to achieve that. But there's definitely been occasions where we've gone to games and, by any means necessary, to try and win the game.
I think people are beginning to understand as well, though, is there is a process. And if you're only focusing on the result, which most percentage managers, the people who play percentages, that's what they do, focus on the result, rather than the process of how they get the result, they tend to fall short in the end. And again, complimenting Anthony, like he said at the start, we've found it hard at times trying to play the way we play, but we do learn, we do improve, we do develop, and in the long run, it comes good for you. And I think that's the way coaching's going. People have got a strong coach education and a strong philosophy, tend to believe that, And the short term might not be quite as successful as some of the percentage managers, but the long term tends to be better.
We asked the question, Anthony, about non-league football and have we got to the stage where a win is still a win, and we're judging managers now on their styles of play. Is it fair to say, if we dip into the Football League and perhaps look up towards the Premier League and the Championship now, that we are now seeing fans and supporters of clubs that even if their team is winning, and there are a few examples in there of teams like West Brom and Tony Pulis doing a job in there, that the fans aren't happy at that level with just winning football?
I mean, you're talking about big football clubs there. I mean, a good friend of mine, Luke Dowling's just got the sporting director's job. He's just gone over from Nottingham Forest, and he's been talking to me about the expectation and obviously how big the football club is and what a job he's got, because they've been a Premier League side. But just like to touch upon as well, because, you know, Jody, again, speaking knowledgeably then, I've been fairly fortunate in the respect that I've had a chairman that's understood the process of what I've gone through. I mean, I worked at Millwall for 6.5 years, so I worked in an academy framework which was well educated, was educated throughout, and something I miss, Pete, massively. You know, I'm crying out for it, to be honest. Something I loved, but it was a risk for me to come away from that environment and go into non-league football, because the 16s job there, I was working with the 18s, I was working full time, but why go into non-league football? Why, if you've got that already there? But I had a chairman that trusted the process, and I said it would be a process. We're going to lose a lot of games, we're going to win a lot of games, we're going to draw a lot of games, but at the end of it, you'll see your rewards. And lucky enough, we done it on penalties in the playoffs. But you know, we done it. We said 3 years, and we done it, and we got promoted. But you go up, and when you talk about fans and managing that now, we've gone from a fan base of 75 to now 300 that are coming down to Walton Casuals Football Club, and those fans expect good football every week. The fans that are behind the goal and watching it expect us to keep the ball on the floor and move it. And with a rarity where someone might open up and might play one a little bit long, you can just hear a little noise from the crowd now. Can you only imagine that at League One or League Two, that type of pressure on players, on management? If I'm hearing that in a crowd of 300, and then you're talking about 10,000. So that touches upon that question as well. There's a lot managing the fans, managing the expectation. I'm talking about 75 to 300 at non-league level. Can you imagine 10,000?
Final point on this style of play, and I'm going to ask you first, Pete. What constitutes good football? When people talk about it quite a lot, they say my team plays great football, Anthony's team plays great. What is good football?
I think good football is when you allow players the freedom to express themselves. I think you know, one of the things that we talk about a lot about philosophy and what's my style of play and this sort of stuff. I think when you look at a player and you have a group of players, you look at them and you've got to look at them as individuals and what are their strengths and weaknesses. Now, if they can get the ball down and they can play through the thirds, let them do that. You know, your job is to try and just tweak it and say, right, okay, don't play there because it's a little bit tight there. Recognise when you're going to be pressured and so on and so forth. And I think what we're quite lucky with in this country is that because of things like Charter Standard and all that sort of stuff, more clubs have got coaches at the younger ages where they coach the kids. So as they grow up through the ages and they're getting coached. So when they get into the non-leagues or the leagues and so on and so forth, we're actually getting players who understand about playing. And players want to play. They want to get the ball. They want to, even if they're probably not that good, they want to play. So when we talk about styles of play, we have to look at the types of play that we're producing, look at the England team, look at those players that are coming through, that have come through the system, and they will have started at grassroots. Because nobody starts in the game as a pro. You start grassroots and they've gone through. So somewhere along the line, somebody's given them that feeling of, yeah, we can play, we can be comfortable on the ball.
I think for me, just to give it some balance, I think good football for me, we've all got our ideas of what we like, but good football is when I can see an identity, see a structure, see a plan, see a philosophy. Bad football is when you just throw 11 players out there and say, do what you want, and it can go horribly wrong.
Yeah, echo that. Something stylistic, and also I would say on top of the identity side of things, I think a team cohesion. So seeing leadership on a football pitch for me constitutes good football, not just from the dugout and understanding or identifying a good coaching staff or a good team behind a team, actually noticing players on a football pitch managing games well enough within the style that they play in, and then being able to sit back and watch that without jumping out your seat to make a comment about it.
Certainly is one of those debates that will go on, and we'll continue to do more of on the show. And we're going to show some footage in future weeks, and we'll get the guys on the back of the net sofa to analyse some of the games for you as well. If you want to get involved in the debate tonight on anything, we started with referees, we've gone on to playing like Manchester City and Barcelona. Get involved on the debate. It's official BOTN across social media. Right, we're going to have a look at the non-league paper now, and we're going to bring in our expert this week, who's been trawling through the non-league paper to look for stories, James Cummins. Very good evening, James. So plenty to talk about in the non-league paper this week.
Yeah, lots to talk about in the non-league paper, and the main headline story is involving Sam Ricketts at Wrexham. Of course, he's had a lot of interest from league level, Shrewsbury in particular. The bookies have made him favourite to take over from John Askey, who was sacked by the League One club last week. But Ricketts has stayed firm with the National League side. They're currently third at the moment. They're chasing behind league leaders Leyton Orient and also Salford City. Of course, big spenders so far this year. But Ricketts has said that he is staying put at the time being, and of course is going nowhere. Shrewsbury are currently in action at the moment in the FA Cup against Salford, of all teams, in their replay, and they're currently winning. So interesting news story to come from that from Wales. Sam Ricketts, favourite to go to Shrewsbury, but he's not going to go anywhere for the time being.
Not Paul Hurst.
No.
We'll see.
Well, we'll see about that. Next story to come out of the paper. Again, a very, very interesting story. Another striker involved, and that is with Danny Rowe of AFC Fylde. He's had a great season so far. 12 goals so far for the season. Scored 52 goals last season in their National League North winning campaign. Of course, a lot of interest going in that striker with league clubs. But Dave Challoner, the boss of AFC Fylde, has said that not many clubs are paying big transfer fees for players in January, and it would be a big risk if they take him away. Of course, it's, I would say, a big fear of any club and of any manager to lose their top striker in the January transfer window, but it does look like that the interest is not going to abate for Danny Rowe come January. And talking of strikers, another interesting story in the paper is regarding Dan Holman. Of course, in previous seasons, he's had great success with different clubs, notably Colchester, Cheltenham, Woking when he was on loan, but his career's kind of stuttered a bit. He's had spells again at places like Boreham Wood. He was recently at Aldershot but left by mutual consent recently. He's recently signed for step-free club Kettering Town. Of course, we remember Kettering Town when they were quite a big non-league team with great success in the past, but he's signed up with them for the remainder of the season. That could be a really, really key signing for that club to get back into the Vanarama North come next season. So they're the big three top stories in the non-league paper. Plenty more to talk about.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at the non-league paper each week, and from next week we'll be looking at the non-league paper's team of the week and get your opinions on that. Plenty to talk about in weeks to come. My thanks to Frank Wilson, Jody Brown, Anthony Gayle, James Cummins, and of course Peter Augustine. And do join us next week for another non-league debate.
Welcome to the non-league debate extra time here. We've talked about team effort and the style of team play, but let's talk about the individual players, the ones that have stood out so far. Which guys do you think you've seen so far this season are going to really make it to the top level? And I will start with you, Frank. Right, do it again.